Are we there? It looks like 2 o'clock. Okay. Call the meeting to order at 2 o'clock. Let's go to item number 1, item number 2, committee public comments. Anybody? Is there anybody on the line?
Is there anybody watching? Just us? Okay.
Pardon? Nobody there? Okay. Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority, and I guess that's mine. Anyway. Just to go through a summary of what is currently happening. The imported water effort continues. It's not clear if affordable entitlement is available, and it's not clear if the GA has funding to purchase it, if it is available. Most of the work is being done by Capital Corps right now, and they're doing an outstanding job, actually, I feel. The shallow well mitigation study is beginning. The shallow well impact reporting form was approved at the last meeting, April 14th. Recycled water alternative study continues. The TSS monitoring well in the El Paso area is continuing, and I'm assuming that samples are being analyzed and we'll be getting a report out soon. The Rose Valley royalty-funded monitoring well is starting up, and the drilling I expect will start the fall of this year, 2021. It appears that there are going to be 2 new wells and 1 well rehabilitation, all of those being on BLM land. The 2022 COSO royalty project is being finalized. It appears that the TAC has recommended further site investigation. I'm not sure how far along they are with regard to where that site is going to be. The annual GSP report for water year 2020 was sent to DWR on April 1st. The GA board was briefed on April 14th, and I'll have more to say about that a little later. In terms of outstanding issues, the finance report was not provided at the April 14th meeting, and according to the manager, they're still collecting data. And I think we all understand and appreciate that was a can of worms to start with. So, but I'm still hoping that we can get a report out soon. Bottom line is we do not have a current status of the GA financial condition. Searles Valley Minerals has petitioned the court for a temporary restraining order to block the GA from enforcing the replenishment fee. And my understanding is that that didn't go anywhere. Is that what your understanding is, Don?
There's a hearing set for May 20th. There was no, from what I heard, it was the judge's opinion that there would be no damages between now and the next hearing at the 20th, so, yeah.
Yeah, that's what Jim's note, I believe, said. So, yeah, that's what I'm thinking as well. The Water District is the only known entity paying the replenishment fee at this point in time. And of course, we're paying it under protest. The transition pool still has some uncertainty. We believe most or all of the eligible farmers are still in. We don't know if there's anybody who is actually wanting to buy the water from any of the farmers, at least last input that I had. As I pointed out above, the GSP annual report was released by the staff to the DWR before being reviewed or approved by the GA. I requested at the last meeting that we develop a release procedure for that document. I think it's totally inappropriate for the staff to be releasing a document with that importance without the approval of GA. Also, at the last meeting, I requested an agenda item on the next meeting to hire a single GA counsel to replace the current committee. of legal advisors. I think it would be almost impossible for our council to act as the lead council next year, considering all the ramifications and legal issues that are going on. I would like to see, and I'm going to express my concern at the next meeting, much more robust participation by the PAC and the TAC. Neither the PAC or the TAC chairpersons have been at any of the GA meetings since I took over in January, and I think we need to change that. And also, something that has not come up recently is, and this was pointed out in the annual report, is there been nothing done regarding dust mitigation program. And if indeed some of the farmers do sell their water, we could have a significant dust problem. So I think we need to start looking into that. Don, did you have anything extra or in addition?
No, nothing I can think of. No.
No? Okay.
Oh, with regard to the annual report, I can say it was sent out to staff for review with 5 days' notice of 3 business days. And that, we didn't have time to go through that document in any, with any detail. We have since submitted comments. Tim Parker, Jim Worth, and myself got together, and I think it was just earlier this week that we sent those comments in. Stetson did say that they would receive them and give them consideration for the next annual report, but obviously too late to get any.
Oh, right. Yeah, and I'm actually surprised that we don't have a set of procedures for releasing that document in a schedule. The end of the water year is September, and so, and the report's not due until April 1. So there's a 6-month period for putting the report together. And of course, they don't have to wait until the end of the year to start putting it together. It just seems to me that we need to have a more rigorous review with the TAC and the PAC and all the staffs and definitely the GA board. So anyway, I will bring that up at the next meeting. Item 3B. I think we discussed that last time when we were considering actually dropping that. Although I guess rather than just drop it, I think what I would like to do is, instead of dropping it, have our staff get a hold of the GA's list so that we can go over it in this forum. I'm assuming we can get a hold of that list.
Are you referring to the Navy COSO project list?
Any list for any grant. And so if that's the only grant list that we have, then yes.
At present, that's the only one. Yes, we do have that. And we mentioned at the last meeting that there was input from Water District staff into compiling that list for potential projects going forward. Mm-hmm. But there is no other list for any other grants at this point in time.
Okay, well then, any list that we can come up with, I would like to see this committee at least look at it.
Do you want to leave this as a standing item for the time being?
Well, maybe reword it a little bit so that the action is just to review the existing grant ideas. What I want to do is see what the scope of them is, because right now, all I'm seeing is monitoring wells. And it just seems to me that we need to be more outgoing. Any comment?
So it's on the agenda now. Who will be responsible for looking into populating that list? We'd have to assign somebody from staff, so.
Well, we've already got the list, right? The list has been populated. We know what the list
That's
is.
it? There's not any more grants out there?
Pardon?
You were talking about finding additional grants? That is
No,
going to have to
just
be.
talking about the projects that we will put forward in grants.
When the funding is available.
When the funding is available, right. Is there anybody online yet? No? Okay, so there'll be no public comment, obviously. Brackish water study. Don?
Yeah, the aquifer test is where we're at with the brackish study. The test started on April 5th, and it ran 10 days. The pump was shut off at 10:30 in the morning on the 15th, and the data's been downloaded. Aqualogic, the consultant that works for Mojave Pistachios, they were running the test, so they've got the data. I talked to Wade Major. He has other projects he's working on, but he said he should be able to get through the data and analyze it potentially by the end of this week, and we could possibly schedule a meeting with the brackish group next week. I haven't confirmed that. I don't know if next week is too early, but if not next week, probably the week after, we'll have a meeting, go over the data that was collected from that test. And that's all I can report at this time.
One of my concerns has always been, how do we use it? How does it become augmented water? And I'm hoping that, the test's good, and the test data will be interesting, I assume. But it's still, in my mind, the issue is, what value is there in the whole program, and how are we going to use it? And when is it considered new water is really the issue. Are we headed in that direction, or?
Tim Parker did have a conversation with Craig Altera, I believe his name is, with DWR. And Tim has put together a little memo, which we'll be bringing to the board at the May 10th meeting.
Oh, good.
To address the question, I know Tim had previously issued a memo, and some board members felt like the memo didn't completely address the questions that the board was raising.
Mhm.
So Tim posed specific questions to Craig at DWR, had a discussion with them, and as I said, we can bring that. I wasn't prepared to bring it to this meeting, but we'll bring it to the board May 10th.
Okay.
And that's to settle the issue as to whether the state will allow us to consider that new water or not. Is that correct?
It's right, basically, yes.
So,
How does that figure into your water budget? Is it new water is,
right, exactly.
Right.
So it's in the basin.
Right.
So that you would assume that their go-to position would be it's not new water. So if that's true, then the value of the brackish water use would be to purify it and blend it with existing water, so we meet state and federal standards, but the idea is to remove the brackish water from the aquifer so that as we continue to pump fresh water from the aquifer, the brackish water doesn't migrate and invade the fresh water and ruin those aquifers for us. And there's a lot of brackish water in the valley, especially at the south end, so
Yeah, and
that'd
there
be
may-
the real reason to use it.
Well, and there may
Also, it
be,
extends,
yeah.
I'm sorry, also it extends the life of the freshwater basin by, say, you can use 80-20 mix, you're saving 20%.
ahead of the board meeting, I can give you a
Okay.
executive summary, basically saying that, yeah, it's not new water, it's part of the basin, but
I didn't think so, yeah.
But they do not see where producing that water produces any undesirable results, so,
Okay. So you can use it.
so they,
It's
yeah,
not-
they,
all right.
exactly.
So it's mixing is really pretty much or using it for plant processes in Trona, for example, where they can use brackish water.
Right,
Okay.
as
Thanks.
could COSO.
Roger, yeah, that's right. And then return fresh water from the condensation towers, yeah.
Has the brackish water committee looked at what the cost of processing? I'm assuming that there's already people around the world that are processing brackish water for one reason or another. Have we got any data at all on what?
That would be a second phase, more than likely, of this project. This project was just to look at brackish water resources and the feasibility of possibly recovering it. But as far as costs, the second phase, if you will, would require another grant to put a pilot project together to actually pump the water and treat it. So this project, that part of the process isn't included in the scope of this initial grant.
Okay.
Yeah, former Director Kaczynski was saying that the byproducts from the processing, the salts and other solids, have to be stored in a particular fashion that might end up being one of the more expensive components of
Well, yeah,
water
I mean,
processing.
and so until you get some feel for what the cost of doing it is, you still don't have a good feel for whether it's useful.
One,
Or not.
one thing that was discussed in previous years was that the coastal power plant was interested in obtaining the brackish water to help them with their operations. And by the time they get done, and it's gone through the cooling towers, they can actually return fresh water for the brackish that they used, and there's no special treatment. They can use the brackish water when they're injecting it into the well field, collect the steam, and then send the steam back down. That's probably the cheapest way, apart from the expense of the pipe, of processing the water.
Yeah. I guess I was always curious about whether or not pumping brackish water down their wells or down wherever they pump it down might contaminate where they're pumping it down and destroy the geothermal properties of.
You mean plug the cracks in the rock and so
Yeah,
forth?
yeah.
I'm sure they've taken that into account at high temperatures and pressures. I don't know whether the solids that we have are gonna
Yeah.
come out of precipitation or not, so I don't know the answer to that question.
But if steam is coming up, that means that all the minerals that was in the water going down is down there. Okay. Okay, alternate water sources. This is something that I had asked to have put on. One of the things that came out of the annual report was that in the El Paso area, and that was the only one that was brought out individually relative to the whole aquifer, is that the water contained, or the water volume contained in that area has been going up for the last 5 years. Actually, it went down 1 year, but very slightly. Overall, the water stored in the El Paso area has gone up somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 acre feet a year, which is considerable. Unfortunately, the data only starts at 2016, so we don't really know what happened before 2016. But in my mind, there's the implication that there is more water being discharged into that area than we thought. Because one of those years, there was 10,000 acre feet increase in that storage area.
You talking about the Southwest Wellfield storage area?
No, it was further south, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
That was probably 2019, I would imagine. The year you're talking about?
I don't recall. Well, wait a minute.
That was a wet year, and also, that was the year that LADWP dumped a lot of water out of the aquifer. I don't know, they didn't dump it in El Paso.
Are there a lot of production wells in that area?
Excuse me?
Are there a lot of production wells in that area?
No.
Right, so it's going to be more sensitive to annual changes in the rain as opposed to here where we have a lot of production wells and they're constantly hitting the aquifer.
Yeah, well, in 2016 and 2017, there were over 4,000 acre feet increase. And then there was a decrease in 2018, but a 10,000 acre feet increase in 2019. And overall, over the 5 years, there was 18,000 acre feet in 5 years, so.
That's from some couple of monitoring wells, calculations based on water levels and monitoring wells.
You'd have to read the report. It was, in my mind, it was vague.
Okay,
I mean, they said what type of a process they used, but, the rigor behind all of the details, quite frankly, I didn't think was there.
okay.
But I do think that we need to have someone look at it deeper than this group.
It's still within the boundaries of our basin?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my feeling is that we really need to take it back to the board to establish some type of a preliminary study. I'm assuming Krieger and Stewart would be the right people to do a preliminary study on how feasible is it and is it worthwhile. I don't know,
You mean running a pipe down to capture that water?
yes, yes, or two. I mean, in my mind, you know, depending upon, you know, what numbers you look at, we're needing somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 acre feet of water. If in any year, of course, Don may be actually right with regard to DWR pumping some water, but I don't know where they pump that water. And of course, the other issue is how much of it that is on the surface actually got down to the aquifer. What I've always been told is that there's very little percolation.
Most of it flowed through Little Dixie Wash.
Pardon?
Most of it flowed through Little Dixie Wash. I remember people sending videos showing little whitewater rapids coming through that wash. But eventually, as the wash, you know, moved through to the north, that water just percolated into the ground.
So there is water in the southwest well field. There's no doubt about it. But the fact that it's in our basin doesn't help us meet the state's requirement for sustainability.
Yeah, well, this
So the
water.
only real advantage to running a pipeline down there, and it's a good advantage, is that you're spreading the pumping out over the whole aquifer instead of focusing it around, you know, let's say Inyakern and the Ridgecrest well field areas. So that's advantageous.
Yeah.
But I don't know that you're going to get any other advantage out of it otherwise, because when they're calculating recharge, they're calculating the area that feeds into the aquifer and the average annual rainfall, and then there's some adjustments they make, and that's how they come up with the calculations. They don't use the annual fluctuations, generally speaking, unless the fluctuations go on for 10 or 20 years, and you can prove that their climate's changed in that period of time.
Well, I was assuming, based upon what I read, that they were using well level information to calculate the numbers, not surface water or rain or anything like that.
Yeah.
But in any event, my feeling is that until we have Krieger and Stewart or somebody, and in conjunction, of course, with Tim as well, I'm assuming, look at it in more detail, we're not going to know if it's there or not. But if we don't look at it, we'll never know. So I would be in favor of having some type of a preliminary study be done by Krieger and Stewart
What's the object of the study?
to determine whether or not the water level really is going up and the stored water is really going up, and whether or not it would be cost effective to pipe it in from there.
So there's
Obviously,
two
we're
things.
talking, what, 15, 16 miles south of town?
Right, so there's really two things. One is that you want to confirm the data being presented, the conclusions being presented in the report.
Yes.
And the other is you need a rough cost estimate, what it would take to procure property and then run a pipe up to the property and then commence pumping from that well field and running it down to Ridgecrest.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, and the other one under item 5 is investigating the reclaiming of brackish water that would otherwise go out on the playa. I got Tim's memo. Right now, I'm sorry, not the annual report, but the GSP says that there is a little bit under 5,000 acre feet evaporating out on the playa. Now, that's obviously wasted water, and as we reduce the pumping west of there, in fact, you can look at historical data from ET on the playa, and at one point in time, I believe it was as high as 10 or 11,000 acre feet per year, and it's gone down significantly over the past few years, and I don't, it's been a while since I've looked at it. But the last thing I think we want to see is when we eliminate agricultural pumping, would be for the water that we would hope we would be saving would just increase the amount of water going out on the playa, because that just seems to be an additional waste of water. And I noted, you know, Tim seems to be, you know, real concerned about a number of things, but I guess one of his comments is this would detract from the more important recycled water and brackish water project issues. And my feeling is that the Navy is involved in the wastewater treatment. They're not necessarily involved in the recycled water. That is still way up in the air. And the other more important project is the brackish water project. And quite frankly, I have not seen, and until we get through the second phase of the brackish water and pilot project and know more about it, I don't put a lot of stock in the brackish water program. So my feeling is this is water that's there. It's right now being wasted. Clearly there are environmental issues associated with it. But the ET has gone down from, it seems to me, well over 10,000 acre feet a year to now under 5,000. So there's water there if we can treat it. And of course, I don't even know what kind of a system you treat it. If you have to use reverse osmosis or something like that, obviously it gets expensive. On the other hand, the alternative that we're looking at, if we can't find local water, new water or something like that, we're faced with imported water. Now, I don't think any of us think that imported water is or should be the priority up until we figure out that there's no other alternatives. So my feeling is we should, again, look at what's going to happen when the pumping toward the west drops, and because all the water, my understanding is all the water, one way or another, flows to the playa. I mean, that's just the way it is. So if when we stop pumping in the agriculture and it does nothing more than increases the evaporation on the playa, we really haven't done a lot of good.
Most of the water that reaches the China Lake Playa comes from the North Ranges on the base. The water that comes from the Sierra Nevada crosses under the highway and then heads down towards the Brown Road area, where currently it's being intercepted by the larger agricultural concerns. It would take a very long time for it to get out to the playa, and if it did, it would be at depth. So really the stuff that's evaporating at the surface is water that flowed down the canyons on the North Range. But that's an interesting point. If you wanted to intercept that water so that it didn't make it into the center of the valley, you'd want to put a few new water district wells, say, along Brown Road and capture some of that. And you could do it that way. But we've pumped water down, the water table has dropped, and I think the first thing that would happen is that it would start to fill in those cones of depression that are around the existing agricultural wells. So we have a while before it would even be able to get out of there and migrate to the center of the valley.
Yeah, well, but we are talking, 50, 100 years from now, we still need water. Mm-hmm. And if the only effect of reducing the pumping in our valley is we have increased ET, that didn't do us a lot of good.
I don't see it as a bigger problem as I feel that you're seeing it. That's interesting to think about, though.
Well,
but the real question is, how do you get the Navy to allow you to put projects out there that are going to stop that?
But there's a political issue there for sure.
Yeah.
But the city had a problem with the wastewater treatment plant with the Navy, mm-hmm. and they made some phone calls to Kevin McCarthy, and it turns out the Navy backed off of their position pretty quick. Well, a couple of years, but that's quick for the Navy. I mean, the Navy's not going to like to do anything, let's face it. And that's just something we have to deal with. And there's a political problem, but our point of contact is Kevin McCarthy, not the Navy.
It's probably been 7, maybe 8 years, but I did write a letter early on when I started. The district had proposed a line of wells on the Navy base and never was able to gain any traction with that. Not to say that we couldn't try again, but the district had looked at putting a series of wells along paralleling Brown Road on the
Oh, yeah, but
Navy
you see,
thing.
you're talking way west, right?
Right, right.
And I'm talking intercepting it. See, one of the problems that you're gonna run into with the Navy is the snort track. Anytime you take water out west of the snort track, whether there's a real problem there or not, it'll be a perceived problem to the Navy.
Worried about subsidence ruining the tracks.
Yeah.
problem, yes.
And even though I'm not convinced that it's true, you know, it's real hard to disprove something that isn't true. So, you know, you might as well say, okay, let's do what we can with what we got. And we could drill a lot of wells east of the snort track, significantly east, way closer to the playa, and intercept, but there the water will be brackish. And that's why we would have to process that water. And that's why it's important to know, how does one process? I mean, my feeling is that the arsenic treatment plant, you know, gets rid of the arsenic. It's not cheap, but, you know, it's doable. Is the brackish water processing going to be more complicated, a lot more complicated, a lot more
It's
costly?
going to be different.
Well, yes. See, for a long time, I thought the arsenic plant did reverse osmosis, and it doesn't. I was told by one of our senior operating people. And so that's good, because it's cheaper, I'm assuming, than
Yeah, the
reverse osmosis.
technology for treating brackish water is pretty well understood, and they're using it in Catalina Island and some other locations. So
Yeah, well, yeah, that was my
reverse
point
osmosis
earlier.
It's just
that-
energy intensive.
Yeah, well, you know, there's got to be, and I would assume that Krieger and Stewart would understand all of those issues. But, I mean, this committee is not going to go in and do the analysis for how that's going to happen.
Well, right, so there's the political issue with having the Navy understand that'd be a good thing to do, and the other is that the Navy is restricted by environmental concerns from affecting or impacting the biota at the edge of the lake and all the way into the lake. So there's a lot to be considered before you can pursue that.
Yes, although, you know, one of the things you could do is take some of the brine from the treatment of the brackish water and put it over on the lake bed. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that could be done. The question is, what will it cost? I can't believe that it wouldn't be cheaper than importing water, if indeed there was imported water
if you could get it
available
done.
to import.
I think you're as likely to get that as you are to run a pipeline across a state park and a bunch of federal land all the way down to Mojave. It's
Yeah,
just,
yeah,
you're
I get-
not going to see anything for 40 to 50 years, because it'll take 20 years to get through all the environmental impact reports.
Yes, and that, of course, is to the point, is if we've got an option for looking at local available water, and I think we could easily make an argument that taking and treating the brackish water, which is water that would otherwise just go up into smoke or
Steam,
vapor,
Vapor.
would be new water of sorts. Anyway, what it wouldn't do is affect the well level or the water volume, storage volume in the basin. I mean, that's really the issue in my mind, is if you're lowering the well levels in the private wells, or if you're reducing the storage volume, that's a no-no. If what we do is nothing more than take water that would otherwise be wasted, totally wasted, that might be doable. And it's a matter of making the argument for it. And I think it's a worthwhile trying.
You can certainly look into it. The basin is very complicated, with some water not able to move to other parts of the basin because of faulting, which has caused dams, clay dams to be constructed. It may be that a large, the 5,000 acre feet, not all of it's making it to the Playa to be evaporated. Some of it's pushing its way into the aquifer on the North Ranges and filling the North Ranges up. So you're not going to know without a fairly substantial review of the data what exactly effect that's going to have.
Well, I don't think we have the data. I mean, all the data that I've seen regarding AT, in my mind, has been pretty preliminary. I mean, they apparently have ways of estimating that, but if you can believe their estimates, it's gone down from 10 or 11,000 down to below 5,000. The last thing we want to do is to see it go up to 10 or 11,000 acre feet again.
Well, the changes there are going to be changes due to average annual rainfall changes, and there's no real way of predicting that, because that water that goes out of the Playa is fed by rain and snow on the North
The
Range.
rainwater sure does.
If you get a wet year, it's going to be huge. If you get a dry year, it's not going to be huge at all. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of decades, because we're entering the beginning of what is described as a Maunder minimum. There is a correlation between energy from the sun and temperatures in the planets. And the peak of the Maunder maximum was in 98, where you saw on all of the planets the temperature going up. And now we're starting to get cooler and cooler temperatures as we pass the Maunder maximum, heading back down again, because the sunspot activity's gone almost to zero, and solar energy output has dropped measurably. So who knows? In 1920 to 1925 or 30, there was a restoration of the rainfall in the Owens Valley almost to the levels that you saw in the last ice age, and the lake began to fill up again. And then that dried up, and the lake, of course, is for the most part dry. So if temperatures are dropping, we're going to see changes in global weather patterns, and who knows, we might get more rain as a result, and that will make those numbers go up. So it's going to be tricky to guess what's going to happen over the next 50 years or 100 years or more.
But in the meantime, Sigma is going to require us to do something.
We could be floating in boats, and Sigma will require us to do sustainability. So there's definitely that's the controlling factor in our calculations, whether we're actually getting real new water, and whether we're able to conserve and let's say
it'll
reuse sewage effluent in order to make up the gap between what we're being told we're getting, right, and what we're we'll just have to see. But the best, as you agree, I think that the best right now is treating sewage effluent and returning it to serviceability.
It has to be a priority, but we're faced with working with the city in that, and working the Playa, we have to work with the Navy, and working the El Paso area. I'm assuming we have to work with BLM, because we have to get approval to put pipeline
Absolutely
through there. So no matter what we do, and right now, the city hasn't been all that, outgoing with regarding any type of agreement. So until we have something, we need to continue to look for anything in all options.
So in either case, South Wellfield or the Playa, it's still not new water. And if you're going to look at developing a source of existing water within the basin, there's fewer political impediments if you go to the south and go to the South Wellfield. So I would explore that before I explored trying to talk the Navy into letting me plumb the Playa.
My feeling is that if we could validate or verify that the water stored in the aquifer doesn't change as a result of us taking out the brackish water, and the private wells are not seeing any lowering of their water table as a result of that, we can make a strong argument to use it. But you just made a suggestion regarding something in the southwest Wellfield, and I didn't quite follow.
So we don't have any new water in either the southwest or the Playa on the Naval Air Warfare Station. That's all existing water. That won't meet the Sigma requirement for
Oh.
sustainability. And if you're going to run pipelines and put in new wells, if you go to the south, you do not have to deal with the Navy, whose go-to position will be difficult to overcome. You instead have to work with the Bureau of Land Management for crossing their property, which I think would be a considerably easier task. So if I were to decide which one of those I wanted to exploit first, I would start with the Southwest Wellfield before I tried doing anything
Well,
with
it's
the
not
Navy.
the Southwest Wellfield, it's the El Paso area. And of course, the issue being that if the water stored down there is continuing to go up repeatedly year after year after year, then that tells me that we have underestimated the amount of recharge going into that area. And increasing our recharge from 7650 to 8650 or 9650 would be what we need to do.
So begging your pardon, but the Southwest Wellfield does play into this. And there is property to acquire there that we could use for putting
It's
in
not
wells.
new, but it's not new
And-
water,
And no, neither is the El Paso water.
Well, unless you can, that.
It doesn't matter if you can prove that more water is falling on it than we thought, it's still not new water. Now, if you find that it's a steady, a larger amount of water than we ever calculated, you might be able to talk to the groundwater authority about increasing the estimate for the recharge for the basin.
Yes.
But that's it.
Yes.
That's a different issue altogether, Stan.
Kinda.
It's all related, but that's a
It's all
different issue
related,
than putting
yeah.
in wells.
Yeah, if we underestimated our current recharge, then clearly, that would give us relief from the current problem. I mean, that's the way I see it anyway. So,
So any
Okay.
kind of a study to, I'll just want to say one last thing, any kind of study to look at recharge in the valley and changes to the estimates, before, I think that the likelihood is the GA is going to want to run that study themselves. Although, you know, we could do it, I think they would, and I think they have in the past, had
The
issues with
GA
our doing water studies that they weren't in charge of or a part of.
you know, there's no reason why they couldn't be a part of it. But the water district needs to worry about our ratepayers. And I'm more concerned about that than the sensitivity of the,
We're all
GA.
concerned about our ratepayers, Stan. My point is that the GA can make any determination they want, and if they want to think about whether we're getting more water or less water in recharge, they're going to want to be in charge of that study. And you can take them all the evidence we have. You're going to have to really work hard to get them to accept our information. And I am as worried about our ratepayers as every director is worried about the ratepayers, including former directors.
okay. Anyway, now go on to item 6. Do we have anybody online? I'm sorry. Yes? No? Amber? Do we have anybody online? Just the 2 of us. No. You think we have no friends? We, you know, Don, I really think we need to open this thing up to the public. That might actually encourage some participation.
For the 2 years that I've been sitting on this committee prior to this year, I think we've had maybe 1 or 2 people from the public in
Oh,
all
really?
Yeah,
that time.
these
Yes.
committee meetings generally don't draw a lot of people from the public. I mean,
As
Well,
exciting
we
as they
have-
are,
We, and,
and if they
When I
want to
was
come,
on-
I think they'd prefer probably to join from home than to come in here, but
yeah, well, the plant and the equipment, every once in a while would have 1 or 2 people, and the finance group, we'd often have at least 3 sometimes.
this is a lonely committee, Stan.
So, okay, let's go on to
to your point, that one of those people that attended said if they could view from home, they would prefer to view from home, so.
okay. Item number 6, future agenda items. Anybody? Any member of the public want to put in an agenda item?
I'm thinking if you sing a song, maybe that'll get more people to tune in.
It's probably a good thing I forgot my hearing aids. You're not speaking into your mic, so I can't hear you, so.
Possibly the worst idea I've heard all day. You don't want to stand around and sing.
Okay, I hear no,
Nothing for me.
nothing from you, nothing from me. Don, did you?
Sure.
Okay, there are nothing for item 6. And with that, without objection, we're adjourned.